Can I start? Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kaviviriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvignantiye Burida Janaha. So, we will be discussing the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna today, and the conversation is taking place in Sri Adarlal Sen's house in Bagh Bazaar. And the topic of today's discussion is about God with form and God without form with Vijay Krishna Goswami and other devotees. So there are devotees have all gathered together, and as you all know, two houses were very prominent as far as hosting Sri Ramakrishna and his devotees. One was Balram Mandir, where they say, according to a very rough estimate, Sri Ramakrishna has visited more than 100 times during his lifetime. Otherwise, most of the conversations are either at Dakshineshwar, in his own room, most of the conversations, or some other place in Calcutta. But the you'll find the next highest presence of Thakur is in Adarlal Sen's house. So Adar Sen, and sometimes he used to go to other people's. There was once Goswami, I forgot his name. Thakur used to go there, and some other houses he has frequented, and not only that, M has recorded. But Adar's house, they say, is visited at least 10 times in his lifetime. So it's a very holy place of pilgrimage. That house still stands, though it is occupied not by his relatives, but some other people now. But the house is as it is. And all of you know that Adarlal Sen was a deputy magistrate. In those days, it was a very big thing to have been appointed as a deputy magistrate under the British rule. And he was not only wealthy, but a very noble person. And Sri Ramakrishna warned him, because he was very fond of riding a horse, and he used to move about in his horse because he was a magistrate. Maybe that was his way of flaunting his powers. But Thakur had warned him that he said, you avoid riding a horse. You will see the reason later. When he falls down from a horse and ultimately dies. Not immediately, but that accident had a very bad impact on his health, and he slowly passed away. So Thakur had forewarned him about riding a horse. He had some premonition about Adarlal Sen's death. Now in this house, Kedar and some of the other devotees have come. Kedar is one devotee whom Sri Ramakrishna saw in a vision. Sri Ramakrishna had seen many of his disciples, would-be disciples, in a vision even before they came. Like Narain, there was M, whom he saw dancing in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's group. So we will find a lot of disciples whom he considered to be either his Antaranga or Bahiranga, his companions in this divine sport. So Kedar was one of them, and he used to frequent not only Dakshineshwar, but also the places where Sri Ramakrishna used to visit and hold gatherings, spiritual gatherings. So Kedar salutes Thakur and says, well, I take your leave now. So perhaps he was in a hurry to go somewhere. See, Sri Ramakrishna, till now, if you see the previous conversation, there was a lot of singing, dancing, and other things going on. And he was in deep spiritual ecstasy. But when he comes down to the normal plane, he is very particular about manners, about the etiquette, about discipline, about keeping things in the proper place. So immediately, he is not absent-minded. Though one could have excused Sri Ramakrishna because he has just come down from a wonderful kirtan, so much of dancing has taken place, songs were sung, and normally all the gatherings you'll find somebody or the other would sing some songs, either Brahmo songs or mother songs or some other songs on Sri Krishna. So Kedar wants to leave. In the midst of this, perhaps he is reminded of something, and Sri Ramakrishna asks him, "Are you going back home without telling other? That would be impolite." See, he knows that after all, you have come to somebody's house. You just can't walk away. You have to inform. You should have the patience and the manners or the etiquette to just at least inform him. So Sri Ramakrishna is remembering that. Not only that, as you see, just after the meeting is over, he would be very anxious to single out some disciples who had no means of going back to their homes. They were either poor or they didn't have the means to afford a carriage. In those days, public transport was not so easy and carriage was very expensive. Only aristocrats could afford that. So you'll find that Sri Ramakrishna, even after a very, very elevating conversation, when everybody is about to disperse, he will single out some people and tell either the people who could afford carriage, "Oh, you have some space in your carriage, please take Chinu," not Chinu, there was that two or three disciples whom he knew took a lot of pains. They came walking all the way because they could not afford carriage hire. So somebody would give them a lift, and Sri Ramakrishna used to be doing all these things after a very spiritual and spiritually elevating session full of bhava and ecstasy. He would come down to the normal plane and be extremely attentive about the small things. So here he is telling other, how can you go without telling without other saying? He's gone somewhere, you inform him. It would be very impolite of you to just leave. So Kedar asks the question. He says, he's trying to justify his going. He says, when God is pleased, everyone is. See, that's how we misuse the courts of, even if we are not in that state, we can easily get something in the Shastras which will justify our actions. So he says, why should I bother to please a human being? I mean, that is his sense. He doesn't say it directly. But he says, when there is a famous quotation, Tasmin tushta jagat tushta, means if God is pleased, everybody is pleased. So why should I please others? I can just neglect them or ignore them. I mean, he's claiming that his life, in his life at least, he's only bothered about pleasing God and he doesn't care about society or anybody. That's his idea. He says, when God is pleased, everyone is satisfied. When you stay, we all in a sense stay. But I am not feeling well. I am particularly uncomfortable when there is talk of marriage and worldly conventions. There are social obligations. I had a lot of trouble before. So he's trying to justify, though he says this is the logic he is giving, but he also says, I'm not feeling well. That is one part of it. And other is trying to justify on another account. He says now these people will come and talk about marriage and all. Though Sri Ramakrishna would not allow such conversations, casual conversations, but he felt the type of people who have assembled here in Other Saint's house, you obviously could not filter and ensure that only people who are devoted to God will come. There would be people of all types. If Thakur tolerated them, then perhaps he expected Kedar also to tolerate. But Kedar, apart from the reason which he just gave, that it's enough to please God, I don't have to just take leave. Anyway, he says, I am particularly worried. First he says, I'm not well. Well, that's a good enough excuse if he had, but he adds something else. And he said there will be a lot of talk about marriage and who's married, who is going to be married to whom, and other social conventions, the social dialogues that I have, and I'm not very keen. I had my share of bliss. I enjoyed your spiritual talk. I want to leave. And he says, and then there are some other social obligations which I could not fulfill because of attending these programs here. I mean, these sessions here. And I had a lot of trouble. Maybe he had a family to satisfy. So there are many multiple reasons why he wants to leave. Then Vijay says, you are leaving him, Thakur, here. I mean, are you leaving him here? You are expected to at least be here till Thakur is has come all the way, and how impolite it would be. Forget informing other, but how can you leave him and go? Just at this moment, M is writing, other arrives to take Thakur in to eat. I think after all the programs, normally there would be something to eat. Leaf plates have been laid inside. Thakur rises and says to Vijay and Kedar both, come on, come with me. Vijay and Kedar and other devotees sit with Thakur. So he is not able to leave. Thakur has convinced him to at least take prasad and go. After eating, Thakur again goes to the drawing room and takes his seat. He is surrounded by Kedar, Vijay and other devotees. Now, Kedar makes a submission and apologizes. He realized that he was a bit impatient in giving this excuse. And that is the heading. Kedar makes a submission and apologizes. Vijay has vision of the gods. That's another topic. Folding his hands, Kedar says to Thakur very humbly. Actually, there were multiple reasons why he wanted to go. Perhaps he did not want to eat in somebody's house. So he says, please pardon me. But when Vijay pointed him, how can you leave him here? He is taking prasad here. What is wrong if you stay? So he realizes that I made a mistake by being arrogant about this. So he says, please pardon me for hesitating to eat here. Perhaps he thinks to himself, if Thakur has eaten here, certainly a lowly person like me should not have hesitated to eat. Kedar works in Dhaka. A number of devotees visit him there and bring sandesh and other sweets for him. It is this that Kedar humbly discusses with Sri Ramakrishna. He is even discussing these things. He is curious about that. So he says, Kedar very humbly, many people bring me things to eat. Tell me, O Lord, what is your command? I mean, he had a gathering, maybe in his place. Whenever it's people are normally bring some sweets or something when they visit somebody's house, nothing wrong. But Kedar is extremely worried whether it will affect his spiritual life. So he's saying, I'll do as you say. Many people bring me things to eat. Tell me, O Lord, what is your command? Means what do I do? Should I accept that? Should I eat that? Or will I lose devotion? Because Thakur used to sometimes say, especially about Shraddha food or some other food with evil intention or some motive, if it has been given, you have to be careful, that may disturb your bhakti. Especially it was important for people who followed the path of bhakti. Gyanis could eat whatever they liked. That is, Sri Ramakrishna had given the license to Naren. But in Kedar's case and other cases, he was very particular, and he would prohibit some of the devotees, because he knew their temperament, that they should not consume food which has been brought with some intention by whoever brings that food. So he says, if many people bring, I don't discriminate, because they come to my place in Dhaka and they bring. What is your opinion about that? Should I accept that? Then Sri Ramakrishna says, even if a devotee is a Chandala, normally in those days, those who are outcasts and all the so-called outcasts in society, where people would not take from, not because of anything else, because that person was evil, but because just purely because of his caste. So Sri Ramakrishna is telling him, don't discriminate on the basis of caste or a person's status in society, but as long as a devotee is a devotee, you can accept it. Even if a devotee is a Chandala, is supposed to be belong to the lowest rung of society in those days, he says you can still take food from him. which orthodox people would not do. For 7 years, Thakur says about himself, I was in a state of God intoxication. When I went to my native village, Kamarpukur, what a state I was in. I even ate from the hands of a public woman. Now, this would not have happened. Thakur followed, see that there is a lot of misunderstanding that Sri Ramakrishna used to be very particular about who carried his food, who touched his food. But that was in the initial stages. He explains the different states a sadhaka has to undergo. And then on the other hand, you'll find Naren and Holy Mother also not discriminating, just accepting anything without even. So we find a clear difference in their behavior. But he says, I was in that state. And in that state, I could take food from anybody and everybody. So it's not that you make a rule that I will not eat from such and such a person. But sometimes Sri Ramakrishna was so honest that sometimes he simply felt he should not eat. Even if he was a very rich person or belonged to the highest caste, he would not bother about it. He would reject some food which was very confusing for the devotees. He will simply refuse, sometimes even refuse to take water from some houses. But he says, I was in a state, it was not a permanent thing, I was in a state where I would even accept food from a public woman, but now I can't do that. Kedar, in a very sweet voice, before leaving, he says, O Lord, transmit your power to me. So many people visit me. His house, because he used to organize these talks and other things, gatherings. So a lot of people would come. So he doesn't want them to go away disappointed. So he says, please impart a little power to me so that when they come, I know what to do, how to treat them. You please give that indirectly, he says, please give me that discriminative power through your grace. I don't need to have any confusion. I don't have to ask you. You try to transmit your power to some extent so that I can take the right decision at the right time. So yesterday we were discussing about Vedanta and the science of human resources, how the power of making choice is such an important factor in our secular as well as spiritual life. Everything depends on choice. Power to make choice is the power of viveka or discrimination. Discrimination in the sense, discriminating between what is really good, shreya and preya. So here, it is a very important task in spiritual life, but one of the most difficult. And Kedar feels that at every stage, I am confused whether I should accept the food or not, because you have told me so many things. In the gospel, if you see, there's a lot of advice which apparently appear to be contradictory, because it was intended for a particular devotee. So M is very particular to give the background of that devotee, what was his tendency, what was his bhava, and whom it was addressed. So after, he wants to make sure that the readers don't get confused and think that every advice that you read in the gospel is for them. There are certain advices, certain things that Sri Ramakrishna is saying in a very general way. But there are many things intended for a particular purpose. So M is taking a lot of care to ensure to give the background of this person, good or bad. I mean, he is very honest about it. If he mentions some person, somewhere in the gospel or other, he has introduced that person. If he doesn't know, he'll say, I don't know, he's a stranger. But without giving a background, without recreating that situation, every situation has been recreated by him very painfully. Even the minutest detail, the characteristics of the person who is asking the question, what is he doing, you'll not find such a wonderful record, because these things are very important. Who asked the question? Why is asking this question? What is his background? So now and then, whatever he knows about that person, very honestly, he writes that. And you should all remember that he wrote the gospel, or he completed writing all the volumes as late as 1931. So most of the people who were already old, they had passed away. So there was no harm in naming them. But there are instances like Purna Chandra Ghosh, he was still alive and the gospel was published. And in fact, that saved his life, because one of the conversations he is reading, M is writing that Thakur is so worried because Purna Chandra Ghosh was a special householder devotee, was considered to be one of the Antarangas along with the four illustrious disciples, Swami Vivekananda, Brahmananda, Premananda and Niranjananda. He was the only householder who was considered to be in Ishwar Koti. Even such a person was thinking of committing suicide. He had some domestic problem and he was, anyway, he had so much of vairagya, he thought, what's the point in living anymore? He said, before I commit suicide, I will just read the gospel. Let that be the last thought. So he was so lucky that he opens the page and the conversation goes back several years, where Thakur is saying, M has written, Thakur is not saying anything. Before he addresses Thakur, before Thakur addresses Purna and is trying to tell him something, M has made a beautiful remark. Said all the while, Sri Ramakrishna, Thakur, is very keen about Purna Chandra's spiritual progress. He is very restless, as he used to do. If somebody is not doing japa, somebody is not practicing, is not able to, for some reason, some domestic reason, if somebody is not able to do his spiritual practices, Thakur would be worried and remove whatever impediments are there and give some suggestions. So, in that conversation, M, if he had not written that, perhaps that day Purna Chandra Ghosh would have committed suicide, because he just wanted to randomly open a page, read something about Thakur and then end his life. He was he had come to that point. So, fortunately, of course, it is by Thakur's grace. Otherwise, he would not have called him a Ishwar Koti. There was nothing special. He was just an employee in some firm. He was staying in Delhi and many other places. Just an ordinary devotee for all practical purposes. But as we discussed yesterday, we can't judge. 50% of a human nature is nurture. 50% is unknown to us, known only to the Avtara, one who can read the Karana Sharira. The contents of the Karana Sharira we discussed yesterday are not known to anybody. Even the person who is practicing sadhana, I gave two examples of both Valmiki and Tulsidas, how transformation took place. There were a lot of hundreds of good samskaras lying in the subconscious of the Karana Sharira, and suddenly a stage came, in a moment they changed their whole life. So we should not judge anybody or criticize anybody, because except incarnation, nobody knows what kind of baggage of karma he has been born with. So anybody can change. Any saint, any sinner can become a saint, as we saw in the case of Girish Ghosh. It can happen slowly, it can happen immediately. So people, on the face of it, if you read Purna Chandra Ghosh's life, it's a very uneventful life. Not a life which you will associate with an Ishwar Koti, like you, Naren. It's a different category. They were even far superior than other direct disciples. So you can imagine if Thakur has said that he is a Ishwar Koti, Purna Chandra Ghosh. So naturally, it is not surprising that he opened that particular page where M has written, Thakur is extremely restless that Purna Chandra has not realized God. So when he read that, he suddenly realized, what am I going to do this? I don't have so much faith in Thakur. When I was young, he was restless that I have not realized God. Now, do you think he will just give me up or just dump me? So that immediately after reading that page in the gospel, and that is only because M was so attentive that he had noted down everything, whatever, he even noted the moods of Thakur. So he felt that for several minutes Thakur was restless. And Thakur used to be sometimes when he became restless for something which he felt was urgent, he would be really restless. Like when Naren did not come for a long time, he was whole night he used to tell Premanandji was in that room, oh, I feel as if my heart is twisted like a towel. So it's paining so much. Why don't you just call him? And then they had to assure him, no, 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 we'll go. For some reason, Naren had not come for a very long time. So he was feeling that agony for Purna Chandra Ghosh. And that is the beauty about this gospel. Every person who is involved in this conversation, even if he is asking a very simple question, M has taken pains to mention something unique about that personality. Kedar, Vijay Krishna Goswami, you will find it's a wonderful record. So you know the context in which Sri Ramakrishna has given this advice. Everything cannot be applied to us because it was meant for Kedar, it was meant for Vijay Krishna Goswami. But there are certain conversations which he addressed to everybody. They are universal truths. In fact, in the red letter edition, which was published by Udbodhan, all the conversations of Thakur have been printed in red. The rest of the conversations are in black. So and even in a previous edition, which M had published in 5 volumes, I don't know, for some strange reason, they were removed. Now it has been reintroduced in bold type. He had some kind of idea in his mind that he said these are the Mahavakyas of Thakur. So he used to underline them and publish it with the underline. In those days, I think they did not use bold type. But Udbodhan, when they reprinted a revised edition, the latest edition, you will find there are many sentences. People just don't observe this. If you compile them, it becomes, they are all short sentences, which I think M felt was for universal humanity. It's not addressed to a particular person. So those sentences, he used to call them Mahavakyas. Just as in the Upanishads, there are so many conversations, but the Mahavakyas are very important because they contain the gist of the essence, the essence of the Upanishads. So here, many things would be underlined, but here it's a specific instance, and Thakur is addressing Kedar and giving him a specific advice based on his own nature. He is eating food, he is asking a question, should I eat from everybody's hand or not? So we can't apply it to ourselves, not all of us, because are we in that state? If we are in that state, and if we knew that Thakur, then we will intuitively will feel that this message is for us. The same question was asked by, there is a beautiful article, the so-called discrepancies and Swami Vivekananda's message. It was a regular article which appeared in Prabuddha Bharata. He said, we received a lot of letters by devotees asking him, how can Swamiji speak contradictory things? Once he says, this is the only path, another time he says. So there, Swami Shuddhanandji was his disciple. He writes, these discrepancies are seen or felt by people because they were addressed to different people in different, can't read anything out of context. So that is why some of the great Swamis of our order, they did not like compilations. They said if there is a compilation, there should be a reference. And if there is a reference, the person who is impressed by that quote has to go back to the original, see in what context the reference was used. Why did Swamiji say, to whom did he say? All these things become very important. So out of context, if you quote and apply everything to ourselves, then we will make mistakes. Anyway, that is what this particular incident, Sri Ramakrishna is advising Kedar, knowing his nature, telling him what to do. And he is giving his own example by saying, I was in a state where I could eat from everybody. But again, I was in a state And now I'm in a state where I can't do that. So it depends on the mood. I can't give you a general rule for this. You have to use your discrimination and try to find out what is the purpose of that gift. Are there some motives behind that gift? Because you see, if you follow the law of cause and effect, every person with some intention, it may be a good intention, but still, it's very, very, very rare that somebody gives a gift totally unattached. So, naturally, Kedar asked this question. Perhaps if Naren had asked this question, Thakur would have told him, you don't bother. For you, everything that you eat will be burnt because you are a Gyani. You are not a Bhakta. For Bhakta, it different rules. But at the same time, he says, if the devotee, if he's a devotee, real devotee of God, then even if he is a person of a low caste, you can safely eat from him. And we find Swami Thakur himself broke this rule. Even in childhood, he broke this rule. Dhani Kamarani wanted to feed him first. It was not allowed. Brahmins would not allow a woman of that caste. As mother, you have to give the first bhiksha. So it was the privilege is given to the mother. And at least if not mother, but somebody who belongs to a similar or a higher caste. So orthodox was society in those days. But Thakur broke that rule. Though he was very orthodox, he broke this rule. He said, no, I will accept because I have promised her. I have promised her that I will take bhiksha from her after Upanayana. And if I don't do that, I will be speaking untruth, which is worse than accepting gift. So I will take. And he had his way. So also, Sri Ramakrishna says, he's trying to console him because he feels now unless you give me the power, I will not know what to do, what to tell these people. They're coming in large numbers, bringing gifts. How do I handle them? By not compromising on my spiritual life. So he says, Thakur says, it will come about, brother. It does come when you are a sincere seeker of the Lord. He said, don't worry. I don't have to give any power or anything. When you are sincere in your seeking of God, all the things, all the questions, all the queries will be answered. You don't have to worry. So before Kedar leaves, Yogendra, the editor of Bangavasi, a Bengali paper, enters. He salutes Thakur and takes his seat. Now they start talking about God with form and God without form. This is a very hot topic in those days. The Brahmos did not believe in God with form, and Brahmo Samaj was very popular in those days. So Sri Ramakrishna says, God is with form and he is formless. How much more he is other than these, we do not know. It will not do to say that he is formless alone. Means you can't say if there is anything, it is that the Lord, everything about him is indefinite. We cannot say anything that Lord is this alone and not this. Because then the very concept of God, which says that he is capable of assuming all forms, is all pervading, omniscient. There are so many adjectives given in the Upanishad where no restriction can be applied. You can apply restrictions you can classify human beings, but when it comes to God, you can't do that. So he says it will not do to say that he is formless alone. What he is with form, without form, and he is beyond that. He is much more than that. Now, what he meant, that would have been a very confusing thing. As Master Mashe, when he first came, he asked whether you should believe in God with form or without form. He said, God is with form. If you like God with form, God bless you, you worship that. But don't say that is the only idea. God can. Then Master Mashe, that was the only once or twice he argued with Thakur. He said, how can God be both with form and without form? And he said, should we not tell the people who are ignorantly worshipping image in the temple that God is without form, but because of ignorance, we want to see him in this form. Then Thakur stops his tendency to argue with him permanently. He says, "Oh, you Calcutta people, you always want to teach others. First, try to understand these things yourself. You have no knowledge, and you are trying to explain that ignorant person whom you say is ignorant, and ask him not to worship the image." So that permanently stopped. I mean, after that, M rarely argued. All his arguments were silenced. After that, he decided not to argue, just listen and record. That is why we have a very, very impartial record of all these things. Now, Yogendra asks, Yogendra perhaps was very close to Brahmo Samaj. There is a wonderful thing about Brahmo Samaj. Even a boy of 12 sees the formless God. Now he's trying to defend it, that is the greatness, because in those days, somehow because of the modern English education, Macaulay's education, Murti Puja, it was considered to be inferior. Only ignorant people will worship a god in an image. So perhaps that is the reason why Thakur started his sadhana by worshipping a god in the image. But anyway, this boy, Yogendra or whoever is, a gentleman, he says the wonderful thing about Brahmo Samaj is that even a small child, a boy of 12, sees the formless God as if it is so easy. Anyway, but in the Adi Brahmo Samaj, which is another, they don't object very much to God with form. Now you should remember that after coming in contact with Sri Ramakrishna, Keshav Chandra Sen and some of the great stalwarts of Brahmo Samaj were criticized by a section of Brahmo Samaj followers. That is why it was split. They said, how can you preach that God is formless, and then you go to some person and sit for hours together listening to him, and he's a person who worships not only a God with form, but a very, very tamasic goddess, that is Mother Kali. This I'm not quoting anybody, I'm quoting Jagdish Chandra Bose, who is supposed to be one of the greatest scientists. So this is the argument he gave to convince Nivedita to give up Kali Puja. He said, I accept everything. I even the God with form, it's okay. But why do you worship? Why do you teach these young children to worship this horrible tamasic goddess? That is the idea even educated people had in those days. So you can imagine this Yogendra is very much impressed, and a lot of young people, so-called modern educated people, were flocking to Brahmo Samaj because they like this concept. If it is a formless God, even today, if you see, okay, because Advaita is formless, I want to follow Advaita. And they want to claim that Advaita is fine because we are tired of Christ, we are tired of all your gods and goddesses in whichever form. We were almost atheists, but now when after Advaita, we don't have to believe in any form, and we want to be Advaitins. And they pride themselves. Oh, it's only the ignorant people who run after these gods and avatars and prophets and all. We are beyond that. We are all Advaitins. And they say it with a sense of false pride. So, Yogendra is one of them. And he says, even a 12-year-old boy, how ridiculous it is. What does a 12-year-old boy understand of the formless aspect of God? When we say, even adults, when you say God is formless, what exactly do you mean? Just by saying, I believe in God without form, or even believing I believe in God with form, have we really understood? Have we really understood the concept of what is formless God? It takes several years of training under a guru, Advaitin guru, till he is even considered to be fit to give the Mahavakya, which gives him the experience of formless God. And for that, the conditions are so stringent that if you go to most of the Shankaracharya's mutt, they don't teach Upanishads with Shankar Bhashya. They said, you people are, we teach only Ramayana and Mahabharata for householders. Because how can they even understand? You have to deny the world again and again, repeatedly convince yourself this world is, you can't deny the world when you are living in the world. So you have to renounce. And then you come to the beginning, the first steps of Advaita Vedanta. Then only the world becomes unreal and you feel that. And here he says, even a 12-year-old boy, that is the beautiful thing about Brahmo Samaj, even a 12-year-old boy, as if it is so easy to believe in a formless God. Anyway, they are so much, and Thakur makes fun. But he says in Adi Brahmo Samaj, they are little liberal, but the original Brahmo Samaj is very pure. They believe in God with form. Even a 12-year-old child will say God is without form. You can't accept. And he's superior. And then he says, he's criticizing the other Adi Brahmo Samaj. He says they are inferior because they even attend worship at the houses of rich men. Worship in the sense, worship of the God with form, which they think is out of ignorance. So Sri Ramakrishna laughs because he knows this fellow himself is Yogendra. He says, sarcastically saying, he has beautifully said that even a boy of 12 sees the formless God. Thakur is taunting without hurting him, saying that, oh, even a 12-year-old boy, when people have to work very hard to understand the concept of formless God, practice all the prerequisites of sadhana, they call it, to even become an adhikari to study Advaita Vedanta, a very, very intense training is given where you have to renounce everything, stay in the monastery, and the Guru will decide when he is fit for Mahavakya, and then the Advaitic experience will come. And Thakur laughs and he says these Brahmo people believe that even a 12-year-old boy knows about the formless God. So Adar Sen was there. Shivnath Babu does not accept God with form. Shivnath Babu was Shivnath Shastri. That's how they differed. Some of them believed with God. So Vijay Krishna Goswami, who was basically belonged to the lineage of Chaitanya. So there was deep within this feeling of God with form. They could not simply give up just because they were Brahma. So Vijay Krishna Goswami disagreed and he started his own. So that is his mistake. Now he's criticizing Shivnath Shastri. Whenever they come, the only place where they would come together was Dakshineshwar. Thakur was very good at reconciling these two people. Otherwise, outside they will quarrel. So Thakur used to make fun. Oh, how come both of you are here together today? So Vijay immediately got a chance and said that is his mistake. And then he is quoting Thakur because he knows he cannot defend his position. He says, as Thakur says, don't you know, he says that the chameleon is sometimes this color and other times a different color. He who lives under the tree understands it correctly. Of course, he is quoting rightly because that is the example Sri Ramakrishna gives. That unless you are a constant observer of this reptile, you won't know what color, it assumes different color. But once you see that chameleon and then decide it's green or brown, because it often changes color. So one who has seen all the colors, because one who lives under the tree, he has seen the chameleon in different colors. And sometimes even transparent or colorless. That is the beauty of this insect, this reptile. So he who lives under the tree understands it correctly. One who has an experience, a comprehensive experience of reality only will understand. Then he says, during meditation, he's giving his own example. I saw a movie. Several gods saying, movie in the sense, not the film, but something which was a sort of vision. It's not enacted in real life. He saw many gods saying different things. I said to myself, I shall go to him, meaning Sri Ramakrishna, and request him to explain. Now this is Vijay who is saying, and he says that I saw something where different gods came to me. Now, how can he deny that experience? The same thing with Abhedananda. In his earlier part of his sadhana, he used to see different gods and used to come. Thakur used to nicely guide him, saying, oh, if you have seen this vision, if you have seen Ganesha, if you have seen this god, so many gods and goddesses used to come in his meditation. And he used to come to Thakur, and Thakur was guiding him properly, when all of a sudden, one day Swamiji touched him. Swamiji wanted to experiment. He was believing in the formless God, and Thakur was very particular that he read only the formless aspect, universal aspect of reality. So once he felt a strange kind of power, and he felt immediately he could give some kind of experience to whoever touched him. So he called Kali Prasad, as he was known. He said, you come and sit near me, and when I tell you, just touch my knee. You touch my knee, and he was sitting near, and when he touched, he went into, he had a deep experience of the formless God. And all of a sudden, Thakur came running. He knew something is going wrong. And he came and scolded Naren. He said, you have not even accumulated power and you are distributing it like this. Who asked you to interfere in his training? I mean, he said, you have spoilt his moods. He was having, and unfortunately after that, all the visions, wonderful visions Abhedananda had stopped. That is written in his biography. That somehow he stopped getting all these visions. And though Sri Ramakrishna said, anyway, that boy is lucky in the sense that you gave him an experience of something which he would not have got on his own. But then don't do it, because everyone has his or her own way of proceeding in the path, and you have just disturbed his bhava. So also, Vijay Krishna Goswami says, during meditation, I see these different gods, and he says, I said to myself, he's telling this to Sri Ramakrishna, I shall go to him and request him to explain. And Sri Ramakrishna confirms. You see, many people may have hallucinations, but here Sri Ramakrishna says, you had the right vision. So Kedar says, now Kedar wants to tell something himself. He says, the devotee accepts God with form. The devotee sees God with a form in his intense love for him. Dhruva had a vision of Bhagwan and said to him, why don't your earrings move? Bhagwan said, they'll move if you touch them. I mean, till a sadhaka gives, I mean, that's why they say every temple, unless you do pran pratishtha, though it is now just a ritual, though everybody does it with lot of sincerity, the Devi or the image has to, somebody who has that spiritual power has to do pran pratishtha. That is what he is meaning, that Dhruva was told. Dhruva was wondering, he has the vision, but the earrings are not moving. That means it is not a live vision. So he says, it will move if you touch them. Means, if through your sadhana, you can make a God or a image live. So it depends. The same image which was living for Sri Ramakrishna would be just a clay image for somebody else. They would still go to Dakshineshwar, see the same image, but they would not see it as living. So that depends on the beholder, one who beholds. So what stage he is in. So Kedar is giving this example. In case of Dhruva, we find that Lord appeared to him and said that if you touch it, it will move. That means if you, through your sadhana, if you consider that the Lord is living, then nothing, even the earrings will move. So Sri Ramakrishna then says, we'll conclude with this, and Thakur sings a beautiful song. So I'll just read that song because this concludes this particular topic. So Sri Ramakrishna says, you must accept all these, brother, God with form, God without form. I was meditating in the Kali temple. Now these are some strange visions he had. It's very difficult to understand unless you read the Great Master, because a lot of people uh, consider it to be, inexplainable. It's very difficult to explain these visions, but you have to take Thakur's word for this, because he really experienced, and he would not speak anything which he had not experienced. So everything he said, he didn't try to logically or try to convince anybody or to see what impact it will have on the hearers. He just spoke like a child as he was inspired. That is why Mahatma Gandhi says, his life enables you to see God face to face. One of his Western biographers, Vincent Shawn, he wrote a beautiful biography, Lead Kindly Light. He was very much surprised. How could Gandhi write a foreword to Sri Ramakrishna's life? Because he was requested by many people, many mystics, to write a foreword. Srimad Rajchandra, his own inspiration when he was young, a Jain who also had many mystic experiences, but somehow somehow Gandhi could not be convinced. He said, unless I have those visions, I can't vouch. Just because he said, Are, he is your inspiration. We just request you to write a foreword to Rajchandra's book. Rajchandra was a Jain, he was not Jain, but he was a guru for many people in Gujarat. When Mohandas was young, he used to go to him. A very austere monk. No doubt he was a very austere sadhaka. But when, after his passing away, they wrote a biography. He said, I can't be dishonest. I'm holding on to truth. And till I'm convinced that the visions that you are describing in his biography, which have been written after his passing away, how can I vouch for that? I can't write a foreword. Then if something is misrepresented, they'll say Gandhiji has supported some untruth. So whatever he thought was truth, but in Thakur's case, he simply wrote a beautiful foreword. It was long ago when Advaita Ashrama brought Life of Sri Ramakrishna. I don't know, Vincent Shawn says in his biography, there's a chapter on Ramakrishna Vivekananda. All other biographies do not acknowledge the contribution made by Ramakrishna and Vivekananda in his life. He was deeply impressed by not only the gospel, but he had read all the literature of Swami Vivekananda also. So anyway, this biographer, Vincent Shawn, who wrote a biography which is not, obviously Gandhians don't like that, because they feel, why should we acknowledge Ramakrishna, the influence of Ramakrishna Vivekananda, because Gandhi is far great. That's their view, being followers of Gandhi. So that book has not become popular, but if you get a chance, because we translated that chapter, the chapter on Ramakrishna Vivekananda is something wonderful he has written. How deeply Gandhiji was influenced by these two lives. And he says, I was surprised when he wrote very clearly, very short foreword, very powerful short, but powerful but short. Unless he says Gandhi had some experience, he would not have written it, by the grace of Ramakrishna, obviously. He says, in that foreword, he says very clearly that this life enables anybody, to see God face to face. Nobody will read the life of Sri Ramakrishna. See, these are the words. Nobody will read the life of Thakur or Sri Ramakrishna without going away with a feeling that God alone is real and everything else is unreal. This is coming from Mahatma Gandhi, who refused to write a foreword to his own guru's life. His own inspiration. He was not a guru, but he was a very saintly figure, and so much of pressure was put on him. He said no. But here he did not even hesitate. And Vincent Shawn says, I am surprised, how is it possible that Gandhi, because Gandhi was not a person who could be forced to write something. Nobody could force him unless he felt it, that this was a genuine person. And he says his life, everything he said was truth, and it gives you, this life will enable you to see God face to face. So we have to remember this when we read, that when we have to take all these things, keeping in mind the historical importance of his life, the way Great Master has been explained, but some of the experiences are I'm just giving you a warning because there is a likelihood that we'll misinterpret. He says, I was meditating in the Kali temple. We cannot judge. When I saw Ramani, a prostitute, I said to the Divine Mother, now you see, he's very clearly seeing what he saw. He literally saw. He says, Mother, oh, do you have this form too? Now, how difficult it is to understand. Just imagine. People will say it's sacrilege. How can you compare? You see a goddess, you see a prostitute and say, he says, I prayed, I said to the Divine Mother, Mother, you have taken this form too. That is why I say you must accept all. You can never tell when she may appear before you in any form she likes. That means seeing God in everything, seeing God in every. It's a state which he achieved. It was not just verbal. He literally saw the goddess Kali in that lady on the streets. And then he sang a song. We don't have time now. We'll have to conclude. So if there are some questions, there's some questions in the chat, you can just read. No, they may come. Yeah.
Just one message at the moment.
No message, only chat, a question. If there are some questions, you can ask. No. Yeah, very staunch Brahmo. And he collaborated with the Sister Nivedita. She helped him to write several papers. So Jagdish Chandra Bose was a very good friend. And even Swamiji was very proud of him because he did so much of research. He encouraged him. And maybe because of that, you remember once there was a function arranged in London where Swami Vivekananda presided. It was just in front of the main London Museum. The building is still there. So it was done by the Hindu Association. Some about 300, 400 Hindus were there in the whole of UK. So they honored two people who were educated in England. One was Jagdish Chandra Bose, and who studied in Cambridge, and the one cricket player, Ranjit Singh. So Ranjit Singh was also educated here. So Swamiji, in fact, spoke very highly of Jagdish Chandra Bose. He had nothing against him. But after his passing away, when Nivedita, obviously, she helped him write his papers. She went to Ireland in Trinity College. All the papers were written by her because her English was very good. And Jagdish Chandra Bose was a good scientist, but he could not present properly. But after that, after doing all these things, he approached Nivedita. And he was very fond, wanted to collaborate with her, his research, because she helped him so much. But when he told her, we accept everything that you do, that is Swamiji's work, fighting for the freedom, but one thing you should give up. And if you give that up, we can collaborate. What was that? Give up Makali's puja. He said, you are, yes. Yeah.
How should a devotee in today's world, if we try to synthesize the 4 yogas, how should we determine the rules and regulations for our day-to-day conduct based on what you have said related to Kedar's question?
Yeah, but I did not speak of the 4 yogas. It's a huge, big topic. I may not be able to answer. But 4 yogas are nothing but 4 faculties of the mind. The emotional faculty. Kedar obviously was more inclined towards bhakti. But that doesn't mean Kedar had no knowledge. He also, but the predominance of bhakti is what we should understand from Kedar's dialogues. Though he's a very knowledgeable person, he's asking very good questions. But he's predominantly, I think he should focus, Thakur wanted him to focus more on bhakti. But other people may be more inclined towards Raj Yoga, meditation, like Abhedananda, Patanjali's yoga and others. So for them, that is harmony. In everyday life, if you are asking this question, we don't have Thakur to tell us what is our path, obviously. So Swamiji made a general path for all of us, that you try to harmonize all the 4 yogas. That's a safer way, because we don't have the people or gurus of the capacity of Thakur who could read your mind and tell you this is your path, this is your Ishta. He would even change the Ishta Devata and tell you have to follow this. And he kept a watch over all his disciples. So when that is not possible, we have to safely assume that everybody is born with all the four tendencies: the tendency to think, the tendency to feel, the tendency to willpower, and the tendency to restrain their mind, which is not included in the thinking, feeling, and willing. That is the entire Western psychology. But Indian psychology adds one more power, mental power, power of the mind, that is the restraining capacity of the mind. So whenever you stop the thought flow, it generates power. It's not only emotion that generates power. Emotion generates power, that becomes bhakti. Thoughts generate power, that becomes jnana. So the power of jnana, power of bhakti, power of will, that is karma. But to make it complete, Indian psychology, they have added one more power of the mind, which is very often neglected. That is the power you get if you just put an end or stop the thinking process. The less you think, the more you focus on one particular mantra, one particular thought, it generates tremendous power. And that power, if all these four capacities of the mind, which we already have, it's not that we are born with this. Everybody is born with some emotion. Nobody is a very dry person. He feels. He may feel for animals, he may feel for his parents, and he may feel for some disabled people, but he feels. Only thing, that feeling has to be directed. He also thinks. He thinks, he is very clever enough to think about how to make money. There are so many wonderful capacities, thinking skills he develops due to his education, but that has to be used for jnana. So we are already doing it. So you can't have a specific timetable for that. As some people want, morning can I do bhakti yoga, evening I'll do office, I will do karma yoga. It doesn't work that way. You are a bhakta, you are a jnani, you are a karma yogi, as well as whenever you get a chance, go to solitude, which is very important. Nirjan vas, as Thakur said, allow the mind to calm down, become less restless, and do Raj Yoga, which is very rare. Raj Yoga needs some external support, external environment to succeed. So it is a combined effort, and every time you focus in controlling the thoughts, you are doing Raj Yoga. It may be immediately, you may get 10 minutes time, as Master Mashay did. He was such a busy person, so much engrossed in the school life, I mean, in the school's administration, politics, and everything that goes with it. And on the other side, a highly volatile family where he had no peace of mind. So you can't imagine a person who is so much prone to disturbance than M. But even in spite of that, because Thakur had told him, he managed to find a corner for himself on the landing of his building, whether it was school or house. He'll suddenly disappear. In the school, if you read his biography, all the teachers will be gossiping, chatting, and he will be found to be missing. What was he doing? He used to go to a place where nobody would come, just sit there and enjoy some solitude and think about the gospel, meditate, do whatever. So Raj Yoga is not something you can practice anywhere and everywhere, because to still the mind, you need that solitude. So we have to create. There cannot be a worse situation for any householder than M, for sure, because Thakur had made him undergo all the struggle. A madcap wife, full of eccentric wife, it should not say madcap, eccentric wife, eccentric family, full of quarrels and so many things, to such an extent that he also thought of committing suicide before coming to Thakur. But even in that, if he says, if I could get solitude, if you see Srimad Darshan, many people asked him this question, our house, we don't get. Then he said, if I can get solitude in my house, I could make some time and some place where I could just escape, then why can't you do? You have a much peaceful house than mine. So Raj Yoga requires some kind of external support. Bhakti Yoga is the easiest. That is why Thakur says in Kali Yuga, it's a universal. Most of the householders will enjoy the Bhakti path. But at the same time, those who have the capacity can read books and do Jnana Yoga. So no fixed timetable is there. You have to improvise. Every person has to improvise on by using his own resources, the time he gets, the inclination he has. If he is more emotional, he can focus more on bhakti. There's no hard and fast rule. By a combination of 1, 2, 3, or all the 4 yogas, Swamiji says you can reach the goal. So
What was the name of the autobiography that you mentioned of Gandhi's?
Lead Kindly Light. The name of the biography, it's available, but not so widely read by people. If you see, there is a chapter on Ramakrishna Vivekananda, I think 3rd or 4th chapter. So he says Mahatma Gandhi had an abhorrence for mystic visions. He said, how can I believe somebody says I had a vision? So he believed more in prayer. He said he believed, of course, he believed in religion, he believed in Ram Nam and all those things. He used to do worship, but he says, let us restrict ourselves. These mystic visions, if somebody asked him, he said, I did not have, so I don't know. He didn't say they were wrong, but he would refuse to believe somebody would not take them literally. But Thakur's case, that's why Vincent Sean says, I don't know why, but he not only agreed to write a biography, it is very beautiful forward, very powerful, as if he knows Sri Ramakrishna so intimately that he could write about him. He would not, he says, I know Mahatma Gandhi would not write anything that would not satisfy his conscience. So whatever he may be right, he may be wrong, but if it satisfied his conscience. So the name of the book is Lead Kindly Light by Vincent Sean. Shean, that is the spelling.
The last question, Swamiji.
Hmm.
Swami Vivekananda wished to travel to Australia or Oceania, Africa and South America for spreading message of Vedanta. Did he meet people from these religion of earth?
See, the question is, Swamiji wanted to go to Australia, America. Only South Africa is mentioned because it was Mahatma Gandhi again, who, inspired by his message, wanted him to come to fight for the Indian rights in South Africa because there was a lot of discrimination. So I know that I have not heard of Australia at least. Japan, they tried to take him. But other countries, there's no record that he ever wanted to visit. Egypt, he visited. He visited the entire European subcontinent. He also visited Egypt on his way back to India. And he also visited, not visited, he was planning to visit Japan because Okakura and Sister Nivedita wanted him to go. And he visited Japan, in fact, on his way to Vancouver. When he went first, he visited some monasteries. In Canton in China, he visited. But there's no mention of Australia anywhere. I don't think he had any plans. At least it is not recorded. Okay. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Parnamas.